law. So our two sisters will both make a presentation. They will be speaking in Italian, and then there will be a Q&A session. Sister Simona will talk about the tools that can help for a good and just exercise of power. Whereas Sister Tiziana, the title of her, it's the exercise of the government and its shady areas. So I'm sorry, she corrects herself, the exercise of power and the shady areas. So Sister Tiziana and Sister Simona have also provided an article in our newsletter in order to deepen this topic. I thank you once again for being here. I give the floor to Sister Simona that before beginning her presentation, she's going to start with a brief prayer. We are letting ourselves be introduced to the good and just exercise of power using the words of the Lord. Yesterday's gospel reminds us that the exercise of power is a very delicate issue where we could be at ease, we can exercise it truly at the service of the kingdom of God, being enlightened first of all by the word of God. Therefore, we listen to the word of God that offered to us by the liturgy of today in the prayer of the 9th hour, the one that we are living here. Now, from the book of the prophet Isaiah. Share food with the hungry. Give shelter to the poor wanderers. Dress who is naked without turning away from your own flesh and blood. Let us pray. So, convert us to you, O Lord, our salvation, and form us to the school of your wisdom, because the Lent commitment can leave a deep trace in our life. For God our Lord, amen. In the name of the Father, our Lord. So, it is in these terms that we would like to live this original webinar. Like it said, introduced. It's the first time we hold a webinar, and the way we would like to live it, as is suggested by the prayer. Again, we want it to be an opportunity in order to know always more the wisdom of God and to be always make room for his word in our life and for him. And it is in this term that we are organizing this encounter, that we are organizing this. It is true that these encounters also have the goal of helping us to improve our strategies of exercising power. It is also true that they should help us to understand better the meaning of the government or how to govern, but especially for us, because we are first of all Christians, and then Christians who want to live a very specific form of life, consecrated life, in the form of religious life. Also, the exercise of power is a witness of our vocation. You know well that we are experts in canon law, so we always turn to the tool that we know best, which is the Code of Canon Law. And when the Code of Canon Law defines the authority, first of all, it does so with as a service by those who have received this task as a participation of the authority of God. So to carry out the service of authority, of power, in an institute of consecrated life, in a religious institute, it is first of all to promote progress of the kingdom of God in the concrete strategies of our life. And it is in these terms that this webinar is meaningful, what we are going to propose to you. Inside this general meaning, I've thought about proposing to you to give some suggestions on some help tools. Some tools, having this exercise of power is important, and therefore we do need to find some tools that can help us carry it out. And it's in these terms that I will propose my brief presentation, that of suggesting to you some tools that can help us so that we can live a good and just exercise of power. And this is what Holy Father Francis is asking us, thinking about consecrated life. He asks for a consecrated life that is always more, knows how to manage its structures in the word that he prefers to use, the Holy Father, in a prophetic way. Therefore, also this time we are called to think about the exercise of power in a prophetic way. So let us see how we can do this. I just suggest some ways to do so, some suggestions, and I would like to suggest them considering this encounter. I have this expression in my mind that I would like to use. I would like to propose to you a sort of like an apology of the limit. This is not the way I would like to call it. I would like to use this as a subtitle to my presentation, an apology of the limit. Look at how the limit is in itself capable of suggesting to us ways, tools, in order to live well service of authority. So I would like to talk about limits. I would like to talk about how some limits, some indications on the modality of exercising power become in fact the best tools in order to exercise this power. I think that the limit can be truly understood as a concrete tool that is a helpful one. We can talk about many limits as to the exercising authority, but I myself have a limit of time. In this case, I have some specific amount of time which has been assigned to me. For this reason, I've chosen to talk about three main limits that have to do nature, the way, the modality, and the scope, and the aim. First of all, the limit of nature, of authority exercised in an institute, and a religious institute, is the limit of its ecclesial element. We are not talking to managers, we're not talking to any type of leadership. We're talking specifically of exercising a good and just exercise of power, of a ministry at the service of promotion of fidelity of one's own vocation in a religious institute. Therefore, the limit of nature tells us, meaning which is the church, tells us first of all that we can exercise a good and just power if we do so according to what is called technically the sensus ecclesia, so the feeling, the path of the church, the steps of the church, that first of all, they are expressed to us in the canon law of the church. This is why it's so important to look at authority starting from the law of the church, but not only there. I think, for example, to all the passages that are suggested to us in exercising power by the magisterium of the church. So according to one's own ecclesiality, first. Second, the limit of modality, of the authority in the church that is expressed strongly, clearly, in the limit of collegiality. In the church, the authority is managed in a collegial way, never on an individual basis, never in a monarchy, absolute monarchy, but rather in a collegial reality. Third limit, that is established by the purpose, the aim, tells us that the authority in the church is oriented or focused on a precise limit, utilitas, that is, the being focused on allowing the growth of one's own fidelity in one's own form of life. So these are the three limits that can become, as I said, three tools. One that has to do with ecclesial nature, the other one that has to do with the collegial modality, and the third one, the aim focused to fidelity, according to which I will now ponder on to provide some further information. First of all, the ecclesial dimension, the ecclesial nature of the exercise of authority. Authority in a religious institute is ecclesial, and therefore it has to be exercised according to the understanding that the church has of this authority. In order to do this, I mentioned two canons that I think are quite precise in explaining my intention, and they're canon number 617 and 622. 622. Canon 617, 617 quotes, superiors are to fulfill their office and exercise their authority in accordance with the norms of the universal law and of their own law. There's a limit, but it's also a tool at the same time. The limit because the authority in the church cannot be managed arbitrarily. It cannot be managed according to one's own point of view or one's own sensibility, but it must be managed and exercised in the path of the church. However, this limit also becomes a tool, the greatest tool that can be entrusted to he or she who is called from some specific time is called to exercise authority. So limited by the law. So the superior who has been called to this office is called, first of all, to carry out his authority in accordance with the law. I think it is quite interesting, I would say, that the canon refers to two different sources of law, because it mentions at the same time universal law, therefore that law established generally by each institute of consecrated life, but at the same time it also refers to own proper law, meaning to that specific law, that norms, those specific norms that each institute has in order to cherish one's own patrimony, what we usually call our charism. So, when the own law exists in an institute of consecrated life in order to safeguard our charism. So the fact that canon number 617 refers to proper law means clearly that our way of exercising authority must clearly has a strong charismatic element, and there's a limit in this. This is a limit. I mean, we are not any type of managers. We are not any type of company managers, but we are those who also, in providing the service of authority, they are called to safeguard, to cherish one's own charism. This that is expressed quite clearly on canon number 617 is expressed furthermore in canon 622. Well, once again, it is explained, and she's quoting the Supreme Moderator, Superior General, Major Superior, meaning he or she who has a supreme power, has authority, and she's reading the canon that has authority over all provinces, houses, and members of the Institute. And the canon also highlights that it also has an authority to be exercised, again, in accordance with the Institute's own law. So the text highlights its extraordinary authority on all the provinces, on all the houses, and all the members, meaning it might seem to be a very strong power, a generalized power. However, it poses a fundamental limit to be exercised in accordance to the Institute's own law. So this is the first limit that we received by nature itself of authority. Therefore, the limit of the ecclesial aspect offers at the same time the tool of cherishing, of safeguarding one's own patrimony. So in the exercise of authority, a superior must ask himself or herself this question: is this choice that I'm making, this action that I'm taking, the strategy that I am following, this project, is it really safeguarding the charism? Because this is the fundamental question that one must ask herself or himself. The other limit is that of modality, the way. Who has heard me before knows that this is one of my strong points, and I do believe it strongly. We are always deeply struck by the fact that the Code of 1983, so the text in forth, introduces this substantial novelty compared to the previous Code of Canon Law. The authority of 1983 is managed by two different subjects, which are superiors and councils and general chapters. That is, two collegial subjects. So the Code of 1917 spoke rather broadly, and I would also say anonymously, of the role of the superiors, where the Code of 1983, code which is in force now, it talks about this double element and also this collegiality element. We do not have the superior on her own or his own, but we have the superior together with their own council and also the general chapter, so two collegial subjects. So that word of cum legere, of collegiality, means to choose together, understand together, allows us to understand that the authority must be managed in such a way that you choose, you decide, we collect, we discern, and at the end we choose together. Together. So the choice, therefore, has an agreement, right, to listen to the other, meaning I do not have enough time. I just tell you to look at the aspect of discernment to be done together, of finding a consensus together in order to reach a choice that is truly an agreed upon choice, because the hearts and the feelings have gotten close in order to make this decision. Once again, I refer to the code of Canon 627, when it says that superiors must have their own councils in accordance with the constitutions, and in exercising their own office, they must work together with the council. It is very interesting how in the code there is not one case where the superior take a decision on her own or his own. So the intervention of the council, it is modulated in a different way. It is done so either with a suggestion or a consensus, or together in a collegial way. It is modulated as a consensus, but then the act is in the hands of the superior. The modalities are quite different ones. However, it is quite clear, undebatable, is the presence of the fact that he must work together with their own council, as it is stated by the canon. This is also true in Canon 631, that speaks about the role of the general chapter, that has to give two main indications. The first one is that the general chapter is as a supreme authority, first element. Second, its composition of the chapter, meaning chapter is composed in such a way that it has to be representative of the entire institute. So it said it is composed in such a way that it represents the whole institute in order to becomes a true sign of its unity and charity. See, also the modality becomes a limit. The superior who thinks that he can manage authority individually is outside of the understanding that the church gives of authority, because the church is understood, the church understands authority as a collegial subject. Here is another limit that becomes an incredible tool for a good and just exercise of power. I'm going to the concluding part because I think it was important for me to list these limits. I conclude with the third one, which is that of the goal, the purpose. So the exercise of authority in the church is not just having to do with the organization. It is instead focused on the utilitas. This has always been the case in the church. The authority has always been thought about with having the aim of utility, meaning with the aim with a prosum, meaning of a good, in generating a profit in its best meaning, meaning something that is the good of the person, the good of the institute, the good of the entire church. So the authority in the church is for the good. It is said quite clearly, this explicit goal, canon number 619, when talking about superiors, it provides many indications. I go to the center part of this canon. They should work in order to build in Christ a fraternal community in which God is sought and loved above all. So search for God and love God is the meaning of consecrated life itself. Consecrated life exists in the church, in religious life, for this reason. In order to follow Jesus Christ, to love God above everything else, and to serve the church. The superiors are there as much as they should help religious people to live their own vocation. There's another canon, which is 670. It's quite interesting. It's in the chapter that has to do with the chapter. And it's in the chapter titled, actually, the chapter is titled Obligations, Rights of Institutes and Their Members. It looks as if we have very many obligations. Obligations in living a religious life, obligations of living in management of the goods. There are many obligations, but they have one single right, and it's in canon law number 670, and she's reading. The institute must supply the members with everything that, in accordance with the constitutions, is necessary to fulfill the purpose of their vocation. So everything. Everything that is necessary. Everything that, again, that is necessary, is needed in order to fulfill the purpose of their vocation. And also authority has this purpose. So in religious life and in consecrated life, with the aim of fulfilling the purpose of vocation. So I conclude by saying 3 limits, but that they should become 3 fundamental tools. That of ecclesiality tells us the authority in religious life must have clearly the strong flavor of ecclesial reality, following the steps of the church in fidelity to one's own charism. The collegial modality tells us and offers us as a tool the deciding with the consensus, with that feeling together. So decide in the communion of the other. We would use this word today, this beautiful word, in the synodality, in walking together again. Last limit is that of the purpose, which is a very important tool. How do we exercise authority? We exercise it in such a way in order to allow to fulfill the purpose of the vocation of the other. It is true that our vocation occurs when being under the grace of God, so it does not occur for the effort of our superiors. We cannot ascribe to our superiors all this responsibility, but it's also true that our superiors can deeply collaborate with the grace of God. I would like to conclude with a very important passage of a word that Pope Francis has given to the religious in his the World Youth Day in Panama. It was the 26th of January, a couple of months ago, and this is what he says, speaking to this assembly of consecrated men and women religious. This is wonderful word, and this is that our authority can truly be lived this way. The Holy Father says the following. No tiredness of hope, yes, to the peculiar fatigue of the heart, of he who brings forward every single day what has been entrusted. In the glance of the first love, let us not be robbed from hope, the hope that we have inherited, the beauty that we have inherited. May this be the living root, the fruitful root that can help us to continue to make the life of salvation beautiful and prophetical. I wish you well to all of you, especially for those who are connected through the webinar. Thank you, Sister Simona. While we are going to introduce to you all the people who are following us, the more than 100 people in the 4 different languages. Thank you very much, Sister Simona, because you stuck to the time assigned to you. This gives us the opportunity to be able to have a Q&A session. I would like to specify that in order to ask a question, you can ask for the floor. There's a button with a hand. You can ask the questions as if you were here physically with a mic, or you can also write them down on the chat or also on WhatsApp. But we invite you to speak directly live with your mic. I give the floor now to Sister Tiziana for the second presentation. Welcome back to all of you. We thank also these wonderful means that allow us to be present in this global room. The title of my is The Exercise of Governance and Its Shady Places, Areas. The recent events within our church, specifically the summit that was held in the Vatican from February 21st to 24th, and I know that we have all followed it, title on the protection of the minors in the church. Have highlighted some keywords in the way of exercising authority. There's a PowerPoint, as you can see. Out of these words, I have chosen 3. Transparency, just action, and accountability. Pope Francis, in his letter of August 20th, addressed a letter to the people of God. He had concentrated his reflections on the terrible scourge of the church of sexual abuse of power and conscience carried out by clerics and consecrated people on minors and adults in vulnerable situations. The purpose of my presentation is that of exploring how the issue of power abuse, of sexual abuse, there will be other opportunities. But now we're going to focus on the power abuse that also has to do with feminine consecrated life, that this abuse is due to the lack of knowledge, to being superficial, shallowness, of temptation of an image, or to a wrong understanding of the exercise of power. It's beside the fact. This is a new time where we need to open our eyes, put away our false convictions, and act with a greater sense of responsibility toward the God that entrusts us common good. So it is no time to be discouraged, but rather to start working. So let us now begin with asking ourselves, what do we mean by the word power? Power, it's simply the ability of acting. To exercise power is the possibility of building with those who are next to us a good ideal, a vision that generates life through allowing ourselves to enable ourselves, enable others. This concept is therefore a very positive one. Usually the word power scares a little bit, but in fact is a treasure that was well managed in a time that is so liquid and so doubtful. But specifically because this exercise of power is the light that highlights the gifts and the ability that we have to have an impact on reality. At the same time, this trigger some shady areas. We talk about the feeling of malaise that is expressed in feelings of failure, of lack of being trapped, of fear, of rigidity. That might come from either from psychological or spiritual reason, but we also talk about unhealthy mechanisms, fruit of an ill cultural interpretations of family education, of ignorance, that turn power into a synonym of career, privileges, and social position. Power and shady areas are two sides of the same coin. So when we accept an election with the help of the grace of God, we find ourselves in having to manage both, so power and shady areas. So the experience teaches us, perhaps at the end of our term, that we are called not to fear the first one, so not to be afraid of power, and to address and transform into an opportunity of growth these shady areas. Just the one that is recognized and accepted, this shady area, is positive, stimulating, a source of new energy, a driving force of generative leadership, and a guarantee of legitimate versus an unfair exercise of government. Let us now so examine some situations that fall under the responsibility of religious superiors and that can contain hidden opportunities and falling into the trap of bad and unjust use of power. That's where the shady areas that we must face. So let us now look some of abuse in the exercise of power. And as Sister Simona did before me, we always start from canon number 617, she's quoting, superiors are to fulfill their office and exercise their authority in accordance with the forms of universal law and of their own law. Then I will not describe anything. And then I will talk about another one, canon 1389, paragraph 1, it says, a person who abuses of an ecclesial power or function is to be published according to the gravity of the act or omission, not excluding privation of office. So here it is introduced the concept of abuse. That means to act outside or against the juridical order for improper reasons or against the good of the souls, which is against the good of the souls, that utilitas mentioned by Sister Simona. This canon talks about this ecclesial, has to do with, it has to do with this power of the office. This means for the office, any task or role or office, which means that is established as an official office, meaning we talk about, for example, local, intermediate, and general levels in our world of religious life by institutions, the canon, divine or ecclesial, which has to do, it's the ecclesial ones, with a precise spiritual goal, meaning a power exercised on behalf of the church, and to exercise it, as this is reminded to us by Sister Simona, in view of the obligation, faculties, and duties describes in universal law and proper law. This is a provision that wants to protect the office from any form of potential violation or arbitrary interpretation. This abuse can be either be a violation, means comes from by fraud or by guilt. Fraud consists on willfully and conscious action of a person in charge with the intention of bringing damage to someone. And we spontaneously say, clearly, this is not our case. Hopefully, this is the case. The other one is the abuse that derives from the guilt. And the canon of a second paragraph of canon 1389, a person who through culpable negligence illegitimately places or omits an act of ecclesial power, ministry, or function with harm to another is to be punished with just penalty. If we talk about negligence, that we mean with omission of the right, the diligence, due diligence, meaning it's a lack of attention, of interest in carrying out one's own duties. So we need to study, have an adequate formation, what they are, what our duties are. We speak about being negligent, which is a guilty one, therefore not, but that was because we are in front of a serious scribable. We are in front of actions or illegitimate omissions against law, and we're also in having this done, which is going. It talks about harm to others, right? We also have this aspect. Clearly, here we talk about situations of limit and canon. 1389 also includes all other situations of external violations of a divine or canon law, which are considered crimes that can be, therefore, have to be punished when we have this serious, but there's this need to prevent or repair the scandal. The concept of scandal is a very strong and discriminating one in canon law, and when it is necessary punishment in front of this violation. We must consider also that in front of all these situations, that a member might testify or bring proof, we are also the right to compensation. So now what I would like to do now is to present to you a list of situations of office obligations that the superiors, either they be major or non-major superiors, have to abide to according to canon law. And then we will see that these are situations that correspond more or less to the right of the members, meaning to a specific behavior that has to be applied by the superiors. The hope is the following, that the knowledge of these duties can allow these obligations to avoid omissions or manipulation, even if unaware of doing this, or through violations that can be punished when you find yourselves in front of members that declare that they have been the victims of damages, and so they call for their rights to be applied. Clearly, it will be a very quick list because this is not we cannot deepen this, but I hope this can be helpful to allow you to deepen more this topic. So we have two canon, 609 and 610, that have to do with establishing a religious institute. We talk about the discernment of the major superior with her council. And there are some cases that canon law experts have where we do not have the written consent of the diocesan bishop, or it has not been correctly pondered the use of the church and the institute, or another, and this is the right of its members, the possibility of the members to carry out their religious life, therefore, in order to have their own needs be abided by. These are elements that might be present in a discernment, because there's also the right by the members of not being set afar. Then we have Canon 622, quoted by Sister Simona, so I will skip this. 624, 624, this talks about the superiors elected in a specific determined time. So, as in the past, we more have the lifelong terms. Now we can have situations where we try to modify proper law up to the point that we really reach a government, not having a lifelong government. This is not allowed by, it's a violation of the Code of Canon Law, in this case, Canon 624, and also talks about the interruptions in the offices of government. Then we also have 625, paragraph 3, that says the ways in which to appoint the superiors. This is quite interesting as well, because if there's elected, then it require the confirmation of the competent major superior, and if there's appointed, the appointment has to be preceded by a suitable consultation. You can read this right by the members in order to be in some way involved in this action, in the way in which the superiors are either elected or appointed. Then there's Canon 626 in the abuses to avoid in conferring offices. What does the canon says? 626 says the superiors in conferring their offices, they should avoid any abuse of preference of persons. They are to have nothing but God and the good and the innocent before their eyes, and appoint or elect those whom in the Lord they know to be worthy and fitting. Canon 626. So no preference of people, and it goes on, the canon, in the case talking about the election, saying that the superiors must not. In elections beside, they are to avoid directly or indirectly lobbying for votes, either for themselves or for others. It is interesting that the code is prohibiting a lobbying activity. So we have then 627, 627, 628 on the canonical visitation. And then here, the superiors must be designated for this office by their own, the Institute's own law, in order to the times to visit, and also in a specific frequency, meaning means neither less nor more. So in accordance with the norms of the same law. 629 talks about the obligation of residence. This is quite strong because it's connected 1387 that also foresees the penalty without depriving them of the office if you do not abide to this obligation. This doesn't mean clearly that the superior cannot go outside of the house, but actually she must reside in her own house. 630 talks about the freedom of conscience. They have the right to choose their confessor, and in this case, direction of conscience. And this leads us also to refer to Canon 152 that signals cases of one or more offices that are incompatible, meaning that you cannot hold both of them at the same time by the same person. So you must be careful in the case, for example, a superior, a major superior delegate, superior who is responsible of formation. Therefore, she is informed by inner information in following her activities of a formator, but then heading the formation, that she can use this information also outside. We must be very attentive on this point because there can be cases of abuse of power. Or 636 that says that she cannot be the bursar. the treasurer, prohibits the superior to be also the treasurer. Then 639, paragraph 5, that invites the superior to refrain from authorizing to contract debts unless these can be paid back and without endangering the patrimony of the institute. Then there are some canons that have to do with formation, therefore the admission of candidates that are adequate. And here we must consider both admission to the possibility of the intervention of experts, always keeping the privacy and reputation of the members protected by Canon 220. Then we have these canons that have to do with the term of novitiate, the duration of the temporary profession. Also these, as you can see, are very delicate elements, because the novice has the right to know, to be informed if she is admitted or not. When we have cases when this has been delays that present situations of delay that are in a situation of abuse, ongoing formation, so the right of the members to continue their own formation, spiritual and practical, and the spiritual one, and also support the canon that has been already remembered. Then we have for apostolate, 671, which speaks about the obligation of the license to have undergo tasks and office outside their institute without a permission. He needs to have a permission, meaning this, it's clearly also in this, it's the duty of the member not to decide on her own, but to be in communion with a superior through this permission, requiring the permission, but also on the fact that the superior must also make sure, according to Canon 670, this task outside of the office allows her to carry out the goal, the purpose of their vocation. Then we have 679, Canon 679, that speaks about the possibility by the bishop to forbid a member of a religious institute to remain in his diocese, provided that the person's major superior has been informed and has failed to act for a very reason, meaning towards the sister. Then we have 683, paragraph 2. Here again, the bishop, the diocesan bishop, has a right to visit the activities carried out in the dioceses, and in the case he discovers abuses, he becomes aware of abuses, he must warn the superior, but not act directly, but he must warn the religious superior. And if she does not intervene, the bishop can, by his own authority, deal with the matter. So we have tried to explore how consecrated life is involved in such a current topic inside the church and social society as well, is that of the exercise of power. We mustn't deny that many other aspects that fall under the responsibility of members that are elected in positions of government in our institutes. And no one doubts the good intention of accepting a task of the sort and of the sorts, just the reason to serve and to carry out the light of our charism. The challenge, therefore, is to welcome these years of service as a growth opportunity in the personal awareness within the lights and shadows that follow one another in this role, and also with the possibility of showing to the entire world a style of government that is serene, it's transparency, meaning I go back to the three initial words, courageous in taking right, just action, and humble in its accountability, in being accountable for the office we carry out. To all of you, a beautiful journey, and thank you for having listened to me. Thank you, Sister Tiziana, for the clarity. I thank you because you have given to us a broad overview, and I'm definitely know that there are going to be many questions. I would give you a couple of minutes of our participants in the 4 languages to organize and share. You have a very important opportunity to ask the questions both Sister Simona and Sister Tiziana. I just remind you once again that you can either doing by raising your hand and asking the floor in the chat, and we are going to turn on your mic, both for those who are speaking in English, French, Spanish, or Italian. If not, you can write your questions on the chat and we will read them. We give you a couple of minutes to reflect on what you have just heard, Sister Simona and Sister Tiziana. Once again, thank you. And it's interesting that there are some entire communities that are listening to us. It's not just individual, at an individual level, but there are entire councils and communities that are following us. That's quite interesting.
Bene, cominciamo a...
So we can begin by listening to some of the questions. I ask for the 2 speakers to put on their headphones in case you need a translation into Italian. Let us begin with the questions we have available. Let us start with the questions in English.
Can you address more the role of councils? Can you speak of distinct roles of general superior and provincials and the need for distinct levels of power? Se volete potete rispondere in attesa.
If you want, you can answer, waiting for the other questions. You can start by answering this first question. Can you hear me? Yes. So, in answering, I would like to say the following. As for the role of the council, I would allow myself to say that it's a new way, a different understanding of the topic of authority. Authority clearly is that of the superior, the major superior, superior general. However, this authority cannot be exercised outside of the council. This is very interesting, meaning that the role of the council becomes becomes a modality which is part of exercising the authority. They cannot be exercising of the authority without considering this in working on the consensus of the council. I really like to play a little bit with the meaning of the words, the collegial aspect, meaning exactly leggere, meaning collect together, listen to one another, understand things together. Then after to choose together, elegere in the word to elect together, select together. It has specifically on the intention by the legislator, the current legislature, not to think authority in the terms individually. Here we do not have enough time to delve into this topic, but I think that has to do also with a very different historical context. I would just say this very briefly because there's an essay of its own. When we think about the story of consecrated life, our institute mainly recognized in 19 by Leo XIII with the Condita Christi, due to their specific innovative structure, so different from the previous figures, were safeguarded through the supreme moderator, which was this highest authority that in some way everything, all the authority was concentrated on this subject. We could say the moderator superior, this way of understanding authority was sort of like in some way a safeguard rather than in exercising a new authority, meaning that also a woman who does not have was entrusted to true authority in the members of the institute. This is what the Code of 1917 states. It's as if the Code of 1983 has taken a further step step ahead. And it would be that of saying, quite well, this subject of fundamental autonomous authority, but at the same time, this has to be included in this collegial aspect. And then, as I will repeat once again, collegiality is modulated, shaped in a different way. It would be their own law to indicate the cases where you ask for a consensus, meaning a binding consensus, whereas in other cases where it's just a suggestion or a consultation that according to which the superior is in some way independent. As I was saying, it's different from the ways in which the superior reaches a decision through the consensus and the suggestions, even if the act is autonomous, and whereas I think in the most serious, this admission, where instead it is posed, the resignation is collegially done, so expressing the consensus by all its members. Then this as far as the collegiality. I think that it's correct, the expression of saying it is a subject determined then by the superior in the council, but it's a single subject. It's not a superior on her own or his own, that since he doesn't want to be, is in some way limited his authority through this collegial subject. Actually, this is considered collegially, even if it can be expressed, as I just said, in different ways. What was also asked had to do with different figures of major superior. This is the concept of subsidiarity, which is fundamental in understanding authority in the church in general and in consecrated life. This principle of subsidiarity is the one that, according to which each one must exercise power that has been given, that it's his or hers, that it's, when it talks about subsidiarity, the power that has been given. So there are some fields that are proper, for example, of a local superior that can fully be fulfilled by the local superior. He doesn't have to turn to a higher authority, which is that, for example, a provincial superior or a regional, or even more so, has to turn to the authority of the major superior. This principle is the one, each one is called to stay faithful to one's own fields of competence, meaning their fields of competence that are different. This is very encouraging for us who, and for you especially, who carry out a service of authority. This is very encouraging that the superior general will not intervene on everything. It's true that the canon that I mentioned before referred to 622, that it sends all the provinces and all the houses and all the members. This is true that this has a direct authority. However, it does not has the duty, the commitment to intervene on everything, because there are different ways of authority, levels, we could say, competence or fields of competence, and the principle of subsidiarity asks that each one should exercise his ministry of authority according to the competence that been ascribed to him. I don't know if you want to add something to this. I just want to add this shady area and the general and intermediate level. And this shady area, this not completely clear area, is that the same autonomy that the code recognizes to the institute has been triggered or activated by also inside the institute themselves in the relationship with the different circumscriptions. So this phenomenon has occurred that the provinces in some way have taken their own way. They've taken their own, way. And we have a problem, meaning that at a certain point, the general level has, it's as if has been taken away of any, deprived of any power or possibility of intervention. The importance of the general chapters on the life of the provinces and circumscriptions, there are some cases where it's equal almost to zero. So I think that because of Pope Francis to the synodality and to follow the model of this model can truly help us in come out of this impasse and to find go back to see how nice it is to work together. It's not autonomy of each province. It's rather, as Sister Simona, is the exercise of subsidiarity. But here we must work on this point. Let us try to give the floor now to Marielle. Marielle, hold on a minute. Marielle?
Non ti riusciamo a sentire.
We cannot hear you, unfortunately, Marielle. We cannot hear you.
No, io l'ho tolto. Bene, abbiamo provato, volevamo darti la parola.
We tried our best. Unfortunately, something is not working. She's unable to take off the mute sign from you. Okay. So we have two questions. One question, and another one is a comment in English. We are going to add others, and so then we can give you time to answer.
One important question to me is the wisdom of discerning in electing superiors. How can we avoid to get the wrong persons, as one wrong superior abusing her power can destroy a whole community? Marielle, do you want to add something?
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yes, I'm back. My technical support is not running very well. So the question is more on a moral level. So the question is, how can we find the right persons, in the right position? Because using power in a community can stimulate the life in the community or destroy it. And this is a serious question for me from the moral point of view. So how do we get this wisdom to elect the right persons? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have another question from the English room. One is not a question, but it's just a comment. I also think it's good to emphasize the point of servanthood, in addition to what Sister Simona presented. Based on Canon 618, which indicates the superior's exercise of the power in the spirit of service, implied that in their service they act with attitude of imitating Christ. Christ-like attitude in order to arrive at the purpose, utilitas. Abbiamo una domanda anche dalla parte francese.
We have also a question from the French-speaking group. I've understood that a major superior cannot be responsible for formation. The risk is the same one if it's a delegate of the major superior in a country that is it makes this decision because there are a few sisters.
In italiano.
We have another question in Italian at this time. In Italian, there's another question in Italian. I would like to ask, what do you mean when you say to avoid abuses in assigning offices? Another question from the Spanish-speaking group. Correlation. I think that this question, has been with respect to authority. What is the role of pardon, forgiveness? And Sister Silva, do you mind write the question, or if not, we can give you the floor if you prefer. So we're talking about Silva, Sister Silva. We can ask. She can ask the floor because it's unclear the way it's been written. Are you there? Yes? Sister Silva, you can talk. The floor is yours. Good morning. Can you hear me? Yes, we can. I'm Iris, I'm not Silva. My name is Iris, not Silva. Okay, so my name is Iris. I would like to know if you can, if it's part of the topic, as for relationship, what does canon law say when decisions that can be taken by a provincial bursar, treasurer, the decisions can have an impact of the autonomy of the community apart from the economic. I don't know if you can say something about related to canon law, what canon law says pertaining to the role of the treasurer of the province. We can give you some time so you can answer. So, how to find the right people? Nice question. So, we can say that probably we can work on the long term in preparation from afar. What do I mean by this? That it's always more urgent to foresee formation to leadership from the basis, because really it is a service that we have to carry out apart from being elected superiors or not, because specifically for this desire of walking together with this collegiality to enter into discernment, we need to be prepared to do this. Therefore, we need a formation, a preparation that can start from the first formation. Initial formation should be included in initial formation. I think, at least according to my experience, that we must prepare ourselves to the general chapters without thinking of improvising the elections, meaning there is a great element of autonomy that the institutes can apply, but what is important is not to say that we are all good sisters and that we will necessarily get together and what we will decide is going to be the work of the Holy Spirit. This we do believe this in our faith, but we must also do our best. So this election methods that help us truly in the discernment. And then I would also like to add something else, that we must also foresee a specific formation for the newly elected members of the government. And on this, I think that the UISG is working a lot on this specific aspect. And then I would also say the following, that I think that the sister also say that you might find some superiors that turn out to be the wrong person in the wrong place and the wrong time, but we are human beings and this can happen. But in this way, there's also the possibility of signaling the situations, starting from the council that plays a very important role in this. In other words, I mean to say that it should occur that the person is incapable of carrying out this role. We also have the opportunity of starting some processes or turn to some processes that can, for example, push her to resign if the situation is a very serious situation. As for this in finding the best person for the job, I do not have some big suggestions to give because it is definitely a very delicate task. But I would also like to highlight how the last guidelines of new wine and new wineskins, as for authority, they do have explicitly positioned next to the experience that is also instead the criteria used also in our institutes. Usually in our institute, it's the superior general was the vicar, or the general counselor. We have very much this attitude, and it seems to me right to highlight or to stress how the guidelines, new wine and new wineskins, ask for skill, competence. What Sister Tiziana mentioned, and we must also thank UISG for the courses that it's offering. So in order to carry out some services, you need to be prepared, formed, you need to have trained, properly trained, even if this is taken when we talk about, for example, formators are provided the adequate training, but instead in the field of authority, we trust ourselves to the grace of state, right? We do have this grace, but as medieval culture is telling us, and specifically St. Augustine, the grace is based on nature, meaning grace works, it acts and intervenes, but it calls for nature, and nature means in this way people who are competent, skilled, prepared, or even if they're not competent, people who are willing to prepare themselves to study, to be trained, to receive an adequate formation. I think this is a great challenge that we have. So the world of today is posing to us, and this webinar, for example, is specifically on this point in a way to offer you some elements for a better formation.
Mi sembra che qualcuno...
Somebody else, I think, asked something about 618 on how the service, right? I've understood from the question. Yes, it's quite interesting that once we have established the role of the superior, he who exercises the authority according to universal law and their own law, there's two canons, 618 and 619, that explain how this service should be done. So in the spirit of service, through the ministry of the church. So I always say, also to make fun in various institutes, the Mother General, the General Mother, when he gives a task, they should allow to read these two canons, canons 618 and 619, because we always think that to carry out the service of authority means to act, right? Meaning, obedience, take the most important decisions, decide on how to transfer the sisters, where to transfer the sisters. But this is true only as much as the people live this authority, as we said, as a service, a true service, as a service received by God, a ministry of the church. And so at the moment itself that this lived this way so that they can do things. Instead, they just reduce authority to any other type of, just a simple power, which is not what the church is asking us. Let us, we find a word on the question that has to do with the the possibility of a delegate superior in a circumscription or a delegation, the possibility to also be in charge of formation. The reason is, we know it's quite clear, to having prepared sisters in circumscriptions, perhaps in emerging countries, it's quite difficult. So here, this depends on the delegation, what type of delegation has been given to the person who is appointed by a major superior. Personally, I am doubtful. And by this I mean that I have touched hand situations that are not clear, of difficulty, and this is not written anywhere on the code, because the director of novices I would exclude. But as for the juniorate, clearly the situations are a bit different, in which we cannot we do not talk about the person in charge of formation, but also it is also true that there are some areas where the delegated superior can intervene and must intervene also on the young sister who has just professed her vows. If she has been also delegated due to a change in community, discernment on the studies, or discernment in order to accompany her in the request of vow renewal, and also for apostolate or the ministries. These are all areas where this might clash with the fact that this delegated superior knows that something of the private sphere of this woman that might render not too clear her intervention. It is, as I said, a shady area that might easily lead to power abuses. I don't know if Sister Simona wants to say something. There is no norm that establishes a ban on this, but I think it is quite interesting to highlight how when Canon 641 speaks about the mission to the novice, it says that this is up to for the major superior. So having formator, the same person as a major superior, is in itself impoverishing in some way in the discernment. By this I mean that these two subjects are as if they were in alterity, meaning one next to the other. So identifying the two into just one, meaning these two roles, these two mandates, it's some way impoverishing the discernment process. So there is no explicit ban by the canon law, but there's a ratio legis that says that it's not good to do this, because these two figures, the superior and the person who is responsible for formation, or I think about many other offices, have to be separate in order to allow a better discernment. Instead, if they coincide, there's going to be this impoverishment. It's not banned, it's not prohibited, but it's not the best choice. As Sister Tiziana was saying, in extreme limited situation, it has to be an extreme situation, a limited situation. And then another word on what do we mean by abuse in assigning 626 canon law. So in assigning, conferring offices, what do we mean by office? Any task, role established and objectively. So present in the ecclesial organization. By this I mean we're talking about, for example, the appointment of major superiors, local superiors, or regional treasurers, institutional figures. What do we mean by abuse in this case? There can be various cases in this, meaning, for example, a superior can turn to pressure, meaning that she in some way pressures in order to take a decision that are not legitimate. For example, she might use promises. She might be promises something of advantaging, of privileges. She might be promising privileges or pressure using verbal violence, apart from physical, moral, psychological, or it can be spiritual. So all that can harm the freedom to discern of a person who is invited to cover a certain office.
Allora, sull'economy.
As for the bursar, treasure, as you all know, we have all read it. It's just been published 1 year ago. This guidelines economy at the service of the charism in the church. And recently we have also some formation courses have been organized to analyze a specific document. Based on what I can say, and also of what I've understood 1 year after this guidelines have been approved, it's twofold. The first one is, once again, competence. Being now more than ever, the role of a treasurer, of bursar, has to be carried out with people who have competence, who have the skills. This calls for an investment by our institutes. There are some specific fields where we absolutely need to choose to invest, and this will determine the survival of our institutes. I think about formation and also the economic of authority. I mean, these are where decisions must be done. They must intervene, meaning that we must allow the person to study, to be trained, to develop in the document is not afraid to foresee also figures of technical experts. In this, however, it is quite clear in saying that the choices in the economic field are up to those who are called to exercise the service of authority. I'm repeating this because I think it is very important. So on the one hand, we ask the person who is appointed or chosen to carry out the role of treasurer should be prepared, technically prepared, meaning we ask her to be provided training. Second, we also cater for the help of external experts that do not belong, not members of the institute, that might have some specific competence or might be specifically in some specific field. However, I repeat this once again, economic choices have to be taken by those who carry out the service of authority. By this I mean that he or she who carries out the service of authority cannot allow the treasurers and some experts to take decisions in her behalf. But what I understand, reading these documents and also reading the guidelines to these documents, is as if these people become always more as if they become some experts, full experts that give some instructions. They clearly, the treasurer, Bursa, will have a bigger value, that being the fact that he's a member of the institute, meaning that he knows the charism, and she has been assigned to safeguard the institute as well. But the choice is up to she or he who has to do the exercise of authority. This is said quite clearly by the code of canon law. We all know that the part that is dedicated to economy is an article of the chapter dedicated to that of governance. Therefore, economy and the management of goods is a form of governance, and it says this quite clearly in this latest document, this latest guideline, this latest guidelines, but it says of the stress of the importance and the need of technical knowledge. And this technical, it's not delegated, cannot be delegated in the decision moment, because in the economic sense, the choice is up to the person who is carrying out the service of authority. And a word at a local level, the code of canon law does not prohibit or for a local superior to act as a treasurer. This is only in the role of a major superior or provincial superiors. And clearly the superior general, not the superior general. Then the limits of autonomy, definitely we must go read one's own constitutions to understand what they say, because autonomy is acknowledged in the constitutions. Then we must also see the other sources of the proper law, meaning, like, for example, the acts of the general chapters that establish some limits within which one can decide or move. And then there's also Code of Canon Law 634 that gives some criteria: avoid any folks of luxury, of excessive gain, and accumulation of goods. These are values that pose some limits to the autonomy, meaning that the spirit of the goods, of the ownership of the goods, cannot forget that the supreme value is that of sharing. So it would be an injustice to have communities that are very rich and other ones that instead cannot make ends meet, have difficulty making ends meet. So also this is the limit to autonomy, full autonomy. Another question in French. Tiziana, you have spoken about Canon 629 on the obligation of residence. Why did you mention it? What does it mean today in a world where we're not very stable? Why did you mention specifically this code Canon Law 629 on to reside. Oh, I do know that this is a canon that does create a bit of, well, I would say discomfort. However, by this we do not mean a steady physical presence. We mean having a established residence, and the criteria basically is that of being able to find the superior, to be in touch with the superior, to position her specifically. But we do understand that this code has some parts that are obsolete because, again, it dates back to 1983. Clearly, the possibility of today of getting in touch with a superior general that is traveling the other side of the world is much easier because Sophia is WhatsApp, an email, and more or less many areas of the world are covered. So she must have a residence, meaning that she must have an address, physical address where she is. She cannot be does not have a specific residence, but this does not mean that, doesn't mean that she has to be stuck at home constantly, because clearly it would be a contradiction with the service that she provides canonical visits to be present in the various places of the world. I don't know if I have clarified this distinction, but there is a place where she has her residence, which she goes back to. Thank you very much, Sister Simone and Sister Tiziana. We have still a couple of minutes. If there are some questions or comments to make, I would like to inform you that we will have other webinars starting from June onwards, because now we are working in preparing the UISG plenary that will be held in Rome from the 6th to the 10th of May, which there will be also some workshops dedicated to the superior generals on the topic of canon law. So as you see, UISG is committed in the front line in formation and the update of women religious on this delicate topic. We also ask you please to send to us some of the topics that you think are most of interest to you, and we will try to organize perhaps if questions on this. There's another question in French. It's going to be the last one. A suggestion. Oh, I'm sorry. Can a council vote through a Skype conference? Can the vote be done through a Skype conference, through a Skype votes? Well, this is another frequent question, if we can vote through Skype. The voting session can occur through Skype. Okay, let us start off from theory. According to canon law, vote is secret. And being a secret vote, it is a right of the councillors. So, clearly, we cannot use Skype because secrecy cannot be kept, of the vote cannot be kept. So, this is the principle. Then, there are many ways through which we can decide together without harming the right to vote of the councillors to do discernment that can lead the council to an open, serene, free sharing, also of one's own vote. That is, if a council decides to discern through Skype, do a discernment through Skype, this can be done, but at the time of the vote, the major superior must check whether it's okay for the members of the council to express their vote publicly, or if they would rather have the secret vote. If just one member is to call for a secret vote, then one has to postpone the decision, meaning that they have to vote when they are all present. Well, I think that we can now start close this important encounter. I thank once again Sister Simona Paolini and Sister Tiziana Merletti for their contribution that they continue to provide to UISG and the entire religious life. Thank you very much. And I also remind you that we will also publish the videos published in the 4 languages that you can easily share with the members of the community. These are tools for training tools. We can also share them in the documents of today in Italian. You have the recordings in the 4 languages. I also would like to thank all who have participated. There have been more than 100, and we have also had the presence of some journalists. So definitely it's a topic of great interest. Thank you very much, and good work.